The stories are independent forces. Now, why do people believe one story and not another? That's history. There is no materialistic law. People will always believe this. No. History is full of accidents. How did Christianity become the most successful religion in the world? We can't explain it.
So
Why this story about Jesus of Nazareth and not, the Roman Empire in the 3rd century CE was a bit like, I don't know, California today. Like so many sects and subsects and gurus and religions, like everybody has their own thing.
yeah.
And you have, thousands of different stories competing. Why did Christianity come up on top? As a historian, I don't have a kind of clear answer. You can read the sources and you see how it happened. Oh, this happened, and then this happened, and then Constantine adopted it, and then this, and then this. But why? I don't think anybody has an answer to that. If you rewind the movie of history and press play, and you rewind and press play 100 times, I think Christianity would take over the Roman Empire in the world maybe twice out of 100 times. It was such an unlikely thing to happen. And it's the same with Islam. It's the same, with the communist takeover of Russia. In 1914, if you told people that in 3 years, Lenin and the Bolsheviks will gain power in the Tsarist empire, they would think you're utterly crazy. Lenin had a few thousand supporters in 1914 in an empire of close to 200 million people. It sounded ludicrous. Now, we know the chain of events, the First World War, the February Revolution, and so forth, that led to the communist takeover, but it was such an unlikely event. And it happened.
And the little steps along the way, the little options you have along the way, because, Stalin versus Trotsky, you could have the Robert Frost poem. There's always,
Yes.
you always come to...
And history often takes, there is a highway and there is a kind of sideway, and history takes the sideways many, many times.
And it's perhaps tempting to tell some of that history through charismatic leaders. And maybe it's an open question how much power charismatic leaders have to affect the trajectory of history.
You've met quite a lot of charismatic leaders lately. I mean, what's your view on that?
I find it a compelling notion. I'm a sucker for a great speech and a vision. So I have a sense that there's an importance for a leader to catalyze the viral spread of a story. So I think we need leaders to be just great storytellers that kind of sharpen up the story to make sure it infiltrates everybody's brain effectively. But it could also be that the local interactions between humans is even more important. But it's just we don't have a good way to sort of summarize that and describe that. We like to talk about, Steve Jobs as central to the development of the computer, maybe Bill Gates, and you tell it to the stories of individuals like this. Because it's just easier to tell a sexy story that way.
Maybe it's an interplay because you have the kind of structural forces that, you look at the geography of the planet and you look at shipping technology in the late 15th century in Europe and the Mediterranean, and it's almost inevitable that pretty quickly somebody would discover America. Somebody from the old world will get to the new world. So this was not a kind of, if it wasn't Columbus, then it would have been 5 years later somebody else. But the key thing about history is that these small differences make a huge, huge difference. If it wasn't Columbus, if it was 5 years later somebody from England, then maybe all of Latin America today would be speaking English and not Spanish. If it was somebody from the Ottoman Empire, it's completely different world history. If you have, the Ottoman Empire at that time was also shaping up to be a major maritime empire. If you have America being reached by Muslim navigators before Christian navigators from Europe, you have a completely different world history. It's the same with the computer. Given the economic incentives and the science and technology of the time, then the rise of the personal computer was probably inevitable sometime in the late 20th century. But the where and when is crucial. The fact that it was California in the 1970s and not, say, I don't know, Japan in the 1980s or China in the 1990s, this made a huge, huge difference. So you have this interplay between the structural forces, which are beyond the control of any single charismatic leader. But then the small changes, they can have a big effect. And I think, for instance, about the war in Ukraine. There was a moment, now it's a struggle between nations. But there was a moment when the decision was taken in the mind of a single individual, of Vladimir Putin, and he could have decided otherwise, and the world would have looked completely different.
And another leader, Volodymyr Zelensky, could have decided to leave Kiev in the early days. There's a lot of decisions that kind of ripple.
Yeah.